Are you really going to open that? Podcast episode 111. How are you all doing this week? I hope you're well. I hope you're feeling fit and healthy. There does seem to be a lot of winter bugs going around. A lot of my clients are telling me that their kids are bringing home bugs from school. So I hope you're all well and not feeling too bad. But I thought, actually, this is a really good time to talk about vitamin D. And this is the time of year, to be honest, that I start to talk to my clients, to my family, to my friends, perhaps to anyone who's willing to listen about vitamin D. And I have to be honest and say that I supplement with vitamin D from sort of autumn time to spring, and I haven't had my levels tested. I could get them tested quite easily, but I just kind of go on the assumption that because of the environment where I'm living, because we live at lower altitudes, higher latitudes, that the levels of sunlight just aren't sufficient for me to get enough vitamin D in the winter months. And so I'm going to supplement. So to explain, we call vitamin D our sunshine vitamin. And the reason we do that is because we don't get vitamin D from food, really. There's very limited sources of vitamin D from food. So our vitamin D comes from sunlight exposure. And we create vitamin D from UVB light. And basically, when the sun's rays hit the cholesterol in our skin, it synthesizes it to vitamin D. But we just, particularly in Britain, where I live, and if you're listening in the sort of northern hemispheres, then, kind of northern parts of the US and stuff, we just don't get enough good quality sunlight in the winter months. And actually, it's not at the right angle. So it's not at a strong enough level for us to get the UVB levels that we need. So I basically just supplement from autumn to spring. But I wanted to give you, this week, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what it does, and so that you understand maybe why you might need to, or why you might need to think about it a little bit more. And I think this is the key with vitamins and things is often you'll talk to friends, you'll talk to family, and I find with clients that sometimes they're taking in the best intentions, they're taking concoctions of vitamins and minerals. And when I actually ask them what they're taking them for, they have no idea. So this is a bit of an education episode for you, so that you know what I do, why I do it. I've explained that I take vitamin D3 in the winter months. I actually take a D3 and K2 supplement, but I take it in the winter months. And that's because we can't get it from sunlight in the UK. So I'm just going to supplement with it. So what does vitamin D do? So actually, vitamin D is considered to be a hormone, and it's converted in its active form in our liver and our kidneys. So our liver and kidney health obviously plays a role in that. And vitamin D has many, many varied roles in the body. It's been linked to, and low levels in particular, have been linked to several health conditions, including one that really kind of I think about quite a lot and concerns me is osteoporosis. As a woman approaching the menopause, it's something that I am really becoming more and more aware of. Cancer, depression, muscle weakness, and poor immune function. They are all health conditions that are associated with low levels of vitamin D. So what does vitamin D do in our body? It influences many, many body parts, but let's talk about calcium, because that's the one that I kind of like, not the one that it kind of only does, but something that's become more, I've become more aware of as I've started to age. As I've sort of researched more into the menopause, I've realized that preventing my bone health, preventing osteoporosis and bone demineralization is really important. So let's talk about calcium. Bones are made from calcium, so calcium is really important. And what happens, the reason vitamin D is really important is that it doesn't help our bones grow. Once we get past our mid-20s, our bones don't regrow. That's it. That's our maximum kind of bone density. But we do need calcium in our body. It's part of our natural balance. So the importance is that what we want to do is optimize the absorption of calcium from our diet so that we're not taking it from our bones. And that's what vitamin D does. It has a key role in helping the absorption in the small intestines. And it also reduces the amount of calcium that we excrete from the kidney. So a double role in kind of making sure that the calcium in our body is at its optimum level, which means that we're not taking it from our bones. So this is how it helps with osteoporosis. And it's those two modes that help with those bone health. So like I said, women in particular, men do occasionally get osteoporosis, but it tends to be much later in life, whereas women suffer with it slightly earlier. So it's, you know, it's something we do really need to be mindful of. And the horrible thing about osteoporosis is that we don't tend to know we've got it unless you have a history of it and you go for a DEXA scan. And I don't have a history in my family, so it's highly unlikely that I would be able to get a DEXA scan on the NHS. So unless you get a scan, a DEXA scan is a bone mineral kind of bone density scan. So unless you get a scan, normally the first time you know that you have signs of osteoporosis is actually when you have a break, your bone breaks, and then the hospital realize actually your bone density is low, and that's the first time, and it's too late then. So this is why we want to be thinking about it in earlier life. So vitamin D helps our bodies absorb more calcium from the diet, reduces the amount of calcium that our kidneys excrete, so therefore optimizes the calcium levels in the body and stops us taking it from our bones. Now, also what you need to think about if you are supplementing in particular is that K2 is another really important vitamin when we're thinking about calcium and bone health. And actually there's been quite a bit of research, and if you supplement with K2 and D3, which is what I do, then those supplements together rather than supplement them separately have a better better mode of action to protect our calcium levels. Vitamin K vitamin K sort of helps make sure that calcium goes where it's meant to be. So it's deposited where it's supposed to go, not sort of in our arteries and things. It's where we need it. So K2 has been shown in studies as well to reduce our risk of fracture. So that's quite important. So D3 and K2 work quite synergistically together to help sort of support bone mineral density by optimizing absorption of calcium in the body and putting it where it's meant to be going. Serotonin. So serotonin, you've probably heard me talk about serotonin before on the podcast. And serotonin is our happy hormone. And there have been several studies that show that low levels of vitamin D have been linked to depression. And serotonin is a happy hormone, and low levels of serotonin are also linked to depression. So if you have an antidepressant, it is very often an SSRI, which is a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which means that it stops serotonin being reuptaken in the body and means it's more available for us to be used. And we call it our happy hormone. It helps stabilize our mood, and it promotes feeling of well-being. And we need vitamin D to help us turn tryptophan. So tryptophan is what we get from food, and it helps us convert the tryptophan into serotonin. So we need vitamin D to make tryptophan, to make serotonin, for a happy hormone. So it helps with depression, can help with anxiety, and just mood in general. So we've heard about this seasonal affective disorder, which is when people get depressed in the winter months. They talk about sunlight with that and blue light exposure, but actually it's actually our vitamin D levels that are causing this. If you don't have the vitamin D, then we're not making the serotonin because we don't have the vitamin D to help convert the tryptophan. So vitamin D is a key factor. Yes, these light boxes help as well, but I also think supplementing with vitamin D is really important in those winter months, particularly if you are someone who suffers from seasonal affective disorders. And I think there are a lot of people that I think have that. You might not, there are acute cases of it where it's really bad, but just that general sort of feeling of not wanting to go out as much, not wanting to socialize as much. Yes, it's partly because it's dark and it's cold, but is it because we're just not producing as much serotonin? So we're just not we're just not as happy. So vitamin D can really help with that. Now, our immune health, and I'm sure, you'll have to have been living under a rock if you haven't heard vitamin D and COVID-19 sort of mentioned in the same sentence in the last 18 months. And there has been a real kind of link between, the sort of how well we deal with COVID and chances of getting a kind of bad case of it, and vitamin D levels and low levels of vitamin D have really been linked with, hospitalization of COVID-19. However, However, we have been aware of the link between vitamin D and our immune health for many, many years. It is not just a new thing. It's not just a COVID thing. Vitamin D is involved with both our innate and our adaptive immune system. So our innate is kind of our first line. This is the kind of the guys who don't ask your name, they don't ask where you come from, they're just going to bash you over the head. So if there's a virus coming in and they're going, this looks a bit dodgy to me, they're just going to bash it in. Our adaptive immune system are the ones that we've had a virus before. So, things like if you think about like measles, when you're a child, perhaps, or if you've had the measles jab. So we have these things so that our adaptive immune system will recognize that pathogen if it comes into our body. They're very specific and they only attack those specific viruses, but they are from viruses that we've had previously. So this is why kind of the flu, it changes every year. And this is why we get caught out with flu, but we might not get measles ever again or chicken pox ever again. Because if we were exposed to the virus, it's not that we never get exposed to the virus. It's not the virus never comes into our body. It's that our adaptive immune system recognizes it immediately as a threat, and it kills it. And it goes, I know what that is. We go and find the army that kills the chicken pox and they kill it. So that's the difference in our innate and our adaptive. I hope you like my army analogy. I use that quite a lot, so I hope it makes sense. And I like things to make a bit of sense to me in the Wendy's world. So welcome to Wendy's world, and I hope that makes sense. But vitamin D is involved in both. So there are, certain things that can increase your risk of lower levels of vitamin D. So living at higher latitude. So in Britain is a perfect example. In the winter months, even if it's a sunny day, we just do not get enough UVB. It's not at the right angle for us to be able to get enough vitamin D from the sunshine. The young, so under 5s, and the elderly over 65s. And we're not exactly sure of the mechanisms of this, but they do seem to be more at risk when we've done testing. And the elderly, we think it might be to do with digestive enzymes. So our digestive function isn't as good as we age. We don't absorb vitamins and minerals as well from our digestive system. So it could just be that kind of elderly slowing down. We don't have as much digestive juices. So certainly think about supplementation in the elderly. Those that are breastfeeding, and again, that's just a depletion. So a general one. Poor gut health. For exactly the same reason I said for the elderly, if your gut isn't working properly, then you aren't going to be absorbing those vitamins and minerals efficiently. So poor gut health can affect your absorption of vitamin D. Those with darker skin, you need more exposure. It's more of a protection, so more exposure. And the health of your liver and kidney, because it does get further converted in the liver and kidney. So if you have poor liver and kidney function, then you may find that you have lower levels of vitamin D and might like to think about supplementation. This week, I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. I hope it's given you a bit better understanding of vitamin D, and instead of just taking it because Wendy told you to, or your friend told you to, or the Guardian or the Sunday Times said you could, then maybe you understand a little bit more about the function and why you might and why it's important. I'm always happy to answer any questions if you'd like any advice or you've got any questions. So just tag me. If you've enjoyed this episode, then don't forget to go over and leave me a review. If you can do that on iTunes, that would be amazing. It really helps with our rating and helps other people find them. So that is it for this week. Join me next week for an interview. And I'm talking to Chrissy Vanyo about the positives of cancer survival. And it's a really honest and open interview, a fabulous interview. So do join me next week. That's it for this week. All I'd like to ask you is, what have you got for tea?